support our business and how can we reframe our processes, data and AI. And this is very real. It's easy to get caught up in the hype, and it's easy to sort of think, oh, this is something which is on a very high level. But two very simple examples. When we were at Vattenfall, one of the key topics we worked on there was within business control. And here we were basically trying to automate the way we collect data from our SAP system, from all the different things in order to do business control and our reporting. Very simple stuff in terms of reporting, but how to really automate the data value chain. And we had a 15-minute coffee break. When something is changing in our system of record, SAP in this sense, in 15 minutes, I want this to be seen across the company in our Power BI self-service tool. I want the business controllers to be able to simply have the data there. Nothing fancy. This is 2015-16. But in relation to how much did we innovate, we took a process that typically takes days to do when you close the books every month, putting all the data together, to 15 minutes. In time efficiency, that's 10x. In Scania now, we are working on the core topic of credit decisioning in relation to, I'm working a lot with the financial services side. It's a loan and leasing and insurance company. And how do we take a process, the information we collect in order to give a loan to a company, how do you take that decision down to real time? And we realize all the data is there, in terms of what data we need from external bodies, what data we need in terms of payment history from this customer before maybe. And now we're taking a process that takes a couple of days down to milliseconds. That's 100x improvement. So it's real. And I think the main point here is that this is already happening, but it's happening in one process at a time. So that's why it's not always visible in the large enterprise. But in the pockets, if you start thinking about how can I innovate with data in this process, then all of a sudden you can do this 100 times more efficient. One simple process, one stupid process even. It's just, so it's, and this I want to share with you that if you do that compounding effect, if you do that, if you relentlessly work on that thesis that I will 10x each process, then you will do a lot of value in the existing business, and you will learn and better understand what business you're in to even innovate the whole business. So here we are now, and we get then to the Keynote hypothesis. And the Keynote hypothesis is very simple. The learning curve I've been on, and that I want to share with you, has really been that what is the goal with data and AI transformation? What are we trying to achieve here? And then we coined the topic data AI readiness. So it's simply a word to sort of highlight what happens if I reframe the whole transformation goal, not only as a business goal that I'm trying to make some business more efficient, I'm trying to make more money, but the way I do it, the way we as a company, as an engine, can do this over time. So the main realization here is that you can't really solve AI, you can't really solve data, but you can set up a machinery that can use these capabilities for any purpose. It's up to our imagination to go in and fix the different processes. So this goal, reframing of the mind, we started to put down all the way down to a very, very simple statement. And it's very simple when you have worked on it, but in words it looks like very fluffy. Data and AI as core business in code, capitalizing on economies of learning. We will unpack this in this keynote. So data and AI, how can we take that into our core business? How can we make it part of our core business? And ultimately, if you want to drive real automation, our core business operations becomes more and more software, code. Automation is software to some degree. Capitalizing on economies of learning, I think this is one of the key things we will unpack today. Maybe what this reframing the problem has been all about. Let me show you. The reason I'm going for this, the reason that we need to reframe this problem of how, is essentially we can direct our efforts around data and AI for many different opportunities. And these opportunities, as we progress in maturity, we move to the next way of setting new goals and targets. The value proposition of what we are doing has to do with we invent new product categories, we can get data, we can make a service offering that didn't exist before. But it has also to do with each simple process that we can automate, or the decisions we can automate, or the decisions that we can get more data on to take better decisions, etc., etc. And the more mature we get, the better we understand our business in this digital age, the value proposition progresses. Okay, so how do we make an engine that is perpetual in terms of innovating with data and AI? How do we build a muscle? Okay. So now comes the question, what you should be thinking about in this room. This guy talking on stage, why should I care about this? He said something dare, data AI ready. It's a play with words. We need to dare, yeah, making it into a verb. We need to make our company's data and AI ready. So why should we care? What is the topic of to dare or not to dare? When should we go really all in on this topic, or how should we look at this? And I did something, I took a curve and looked at this at on the macro life cycle scale. So the industrial macro life cycle for me is the automation of muscle power. And we have used data and all that for this, but we see something else. We see something happening now in terms of new types of companies which are data and AI ready, or more data AI oriented. And here now, I will try to unpack a theory around what we have talked about as the AI divide to some degree. This for me is not something set in stone. I'm trying to share my thinking on this. So the AI divide, if you look at the market of the companies out there, if you look at, we have our Googles, we have our Facebooks, we have our Alibabas and Tencents and Baidus, et cetera, they are having a really high market cap value right now, and they are really aggressively expanding in many different areas. So we have the innovators and the tech giants, as the tech giants. We have early adopters, unicorns coming in the fintech industry. We have the Spotifys of the world, if I'm Swedish. And then we have big companies that have been really successful for many, many years, but they're coming from a proud analog history. We're dealing with physical assets like utility, oil and gas, or we are dealing with manufacturing of trucks. Now, we have started this journey. Who has done data and AI the most, right? So the data natives, of course. Then the industry giants, of course, have the financial muscle to get it done. And then we have sort of the late majority who's sort of starting to do it, proof of concept, POC. We do a lot of POCs, we try pilots, but can we make things into production? And then we have the laggards who haven't really started yet because they haven't felt their need for it. It's not that they are sort of less less interested or something, but really from a business economical sense, they haven't felt the pressure to do it yet. Now, if I think about this now, what really have put me on a path now, what I'm summarizing here, is that I think there is a new economic competing paradigm. So we've been learning in school around economies of scale, right? When I was at university, we talked about, how do you build business, how do you scale business, and we learned the terms of economies of scale. Now, Bill Schmarzo coined the terms economies of learning, and I really ask you to look this up and Google this. It's about thinking a little bit differently how we are framing the fundamental mindset and setup of company we're in from an economies of learning point of view versus economies of scale point of view. And the core traits here is that when we work with the economies of scale, we are efficiency focused, incremental. We see a separation of tasks. We are plan driven. So we work essentially in quite stable environments. Like when you run a power plant, right? Vattenfall, it's kind of stable. It's very long cycles when you build nuclear power plants, as an example. And here we have the tech giants that come from nowhere. They're hyperscalers who sort of been working in a different way. So the digital natives, the way they grew up, the Facebooks of the world, the Googles of the world, They were purely innovation and scaling focus, and they were really chasing 10 to 100x improvements. And here now becomes an interesting question. When to do a pivot? Or is this relevant for the company I'm in or not? When should I really work around data and AI to improve my sort of analog legacy business or my analog legacy process? And when do I need to reinvent, relearn, and do it very differently? So this topic, when to think about economies of scale versus economies of learning, becomes a critical question. And let's zoom in on that a little bit. Let's unpack what I'm talking about here. So we started to put frame and hypothesis. And when I say we, I mean the community. I'm talking about Bill Sharth. I'm talking about a lot of people I met lately on the AI After Work podcast. So I have the fortune to be a podcast host for 4 seasons now, where I met 50 plus very, very smart people in different, from the Googles, from the Spotifys, down to the big, Vattenfall and them, and trying to sort of understand how they think about stuff. And here I realize there is a scale here when you need to think differently. And it's a little bit like, are we here to get better on the game that everybody knows? Are we here to make efficiencies and innovate within the rules of the game, so to speak? Are we here and realizing that the rules of the games are changing? Or are we even more uncertain that no one really knows what the game is all about? So let me take Scania as an example. So Scania is a truck manufacturing. And what is their core business, and one of the core competing dimension is summarized in ICE, I-C-E, internal combustion engines. So they're world-class to build manufactured trucks. Okay? Their core business has been about building the best truck. Are they good at sales? Oh, pretty good. But you know what? The product is so good, it sells itself. And now in Scania, we are starting to talk about ACE, A-C-E, autonomous, connected, electrified. So now we have a mind really tough conversation in Scania. Our core cash cow, our core money-making engine is to sell and manufacture trucks. So we are a truck manufacturer, but we think that the transport ecosystem as a whole is changing because of these driving forces around automation, connectivity, and electricity. And we see the movements of aggregators like the Amazon that can basically take it another position in the market and start selling transport points. Okay, they aggregate from all the different people having, we don't need to own trucks anymore. Then we can do like Airbnb, become the platform, the aggregator of the assets. So here we now have the topic of some sort of innovation pressure scale. And this is right now what I want to zoom into. I'm not going to stay on this picture for too long. It's going to be in the reader's notes, but it's too small to read, but it's really unpacking those core examples here. Now, so if I take this scale now, pressure to innovate from low to high, and then we start building on that scale and we start laying it out according to when should I do the pivot? How should I think around focusing on economies of scale versus economies of learning? Here we have now, on the one hand side, economies of scales makes a lot of sense when we're in this sort of efficiency focus. Large scale, centralization, standardization. We want to set up systems that are super standardized that allows us to basically do it more efficiently, one thing. Now, if I move over to the right, we have this sort of challenge where Scania is at right now. We need to do this. The cash cow of the business of yesterday needs to fund whatever business model we need to have in the future, so we need to do both. Really hard. And ultimately, we come to the point where economies of learning really is on fail fast and learn faster. If you think about what Google and Facebook are doing, they're putting a lot of money into innovation and R&D. They have a lot of different unicorn ideas. It's not that they do one thing perfectly. No, 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 they do a lot. And then they fail the stuff that doesn't work, and then they really hyperscale the stuff that works. There's a completely different mindset. And why am I talking about all this? Why is this so important now? Well, this is the thesis we are formulating. First of all, I propose that the innovation pressure most likely will just continue to increase. The technology is going so fast, the data is growing, we can have more data that allows us to get more fun stuff done with data. So the opportunity to do something will just continue to increase, and there will be someone doing it. Long term, it means when we're reinventing our processes in the digital age, we need to start capitalizing on these economies of learning. And it's really very simple. When I'm doing economies of scales, typically I would be super happy if I get a 50% efficiency increase or even 30% efficiency increase in a process. And all of a sudden now, I highlighted that we have 10x or 100x efficiency increase by automation in some areas. Now, and here comes now what is really, really, really interesting in this room. I think short term, in order to work with BI, data, and AI, we actually need to master economies of learning on small scale for the single team. It's in the nature of data. If you want to share data, if you want to contextualize data from many different aspects of your company, you need to have economies of learning. You need to work according to other rules of the game, which is not about efficiency, a siloed function is doing their thing and then they are excelling on this. No, we need to interconnect the whole company. I think many of us have sometimes struggled like, well, I can do all this great stuff with AI, but I can't even get started because I can't even share the data from my neighbor or from my neighboring function. So when you're working with data and AI, you are starting to needing to experiment, you're starting to share things, you need to literally think in a small scale like the Googles are thinking. This is very interesting because it means somewhere here in this room is the learning power and capacity to understand how this will work on a small scale that we need to then bring to the large scale in the large organization. This is my hypothesis. So then the last point of this thesis actually, my journey has told me that if I knew what I know today, I started my journey on working on this in 2016, I would have done a lot of things differently. It wasn't the point that what we were doing was not really good. It was simply that we didn't put enough effort on what was the real core problems. I was, for example, more working on trying to understand the tech. Actually getting overwhelmed by all these new big data technologies and everything, when in reality, this was much more a business problem, much more being able to articulate what was the value of what we are trying to do, getting the technology guys to work close to the business people, those kind of problems which are around the people and how we organize. I would spend way more time there now than I did 2016. So if we now sit here, if we learn as a community, if we look at doing, you can do this faster, in my opinion. I can do it faster today than I could in 2016. So let's look quickly at this. So if you want to hack any process, if you want to do something faster than anyone else, if you want to hack a process, the message number one is that you kind of need to master and starting understanding the complexities. It's not until you understand the complexities in a more multifaceted way that you can then take a step back and say, well, what is really important when I get started on my journey? I could do all of this stuff, but I really put my attention over here. That's what this topic is. So what we have done now, what I'm trying to share with you now in the last couple of minutes, is the way I understand today where I would put my efforts. I'm not saying other things are important, but I think this is where I've been blocked or where the failing has come or when it has really worked. We've done these things really good. So what I'm going to talk about now is very, very simple. It's very much thinking, even if you're really good at this, I always say, think big, start small, scale fast. And if I do that, I can start thinking about my journey and transformation in different horizons. So like, if I started from scratch today, what would be my number one goal to work with in my company? Number one, first horizon, really nail down how we orchestrate for value. And orchestration for value really starts with the business problem and connecting the tech guys and the data people to work very, very closely with the business people. If the distance between the tech and the real business problem is too far, if we don't speak the same language, this is the first problem to solve, in my opinion. When you have done that once for one team or for one use case, then you have two, then you have three. All of a sudden, the problem horizon shifts. Now it's about how can I make them share their data in between the different teams, and how can I basically capitalize, learn what one team has done really good, how can I take that learning over to the next team? So here's different horizons, what is really mattering depending on where you're on your journey. And then ultimately, when you're at horizon 3, when you're living truly like the Googles, then your whole, how you do budgeting and business planning and steering is starting to change. From plan-driven, we have supply and demand, we can budget and forecast stuff, to the point where basically we are putting bets. We have a hypothesis of what this market will be all about, and I don't really know, so I need to try 5 different startup ideas. I need to incubate them, I need to move with them, and then I see which one fails, and then I run with the one that works. This is a very different way of steering and investing, to have 5 bets, and one should work, versus a business case where every single project is a stable, done deal. So last couple of minutes. This then puts us that to be data and AI ready is a triathlon. It's 3 major horizons that I think any company will need to work with in this. And what I'm trying to say is also, you can look at this from the highest enterprise level, or you can actually look at this from a team level and what to worry about as a team. So zooming in, horizon 1, horizon 2, horizon 3. If I split it out, the kind of stuff that you need to work on has different flavors. We had some fun and tried to sort of map this in terms of working on different topics. You know, what are the concrete topics? What are the concrete tasks and mini initiatives I'm working on in the value and orchestration phase? It has one profile. When I do the second horizon, it has a slightly different profile. And when I do a third phase, slightly different process. So basically, where do I put my time and investment and focus shifts in the different horizons, what really, really matters. So last minutes, horizon 1. For me, I said it, it's all about orchestrating value. So if I go into the core team that is supposed to deliver a use case, I propose one of the first things to do is really start thinking about innovation and efficiency around any process like it is a product. So when you start reframing a process to a product, it allows you to think about, how do I do product innovation? So essentially, process innovation, process typically part of economies of scale. We have a stable process, and I want to do incremental improvements to this. If I flip it to product, I can start thinking, who is the product owner for this process? So if I want to add content to this process, how do I need to think as a product owner? This is inside the team. For the tactical layer, typically for the managers out there, the number one game is to make sure that we have the cross-functional team from business to tech together. So the number one game is to make sure that you have a working climate where the data scientist, the data engineer, and the software developers are super, super close to the real business decision makers and the real business process owners. Typically, we have business over here and we have IT over here, and the distance here is too far. We don't speak the same language. We don't talk on a daily basis. We ask the IT for projects. This is different, in my opinion. So how we solve this, we can do it in different ways, but you need to get the vertical integration from value to the UX, to the algorithm, to the data in the legacy systems. That data value chain needs to be integrated as you need to get the working environment right for this. And now, when you get started on this for the executive here, when you're going on this is maybe very, very, very different to how your organization is set up. Don't change the whole organization. Containerize this uncertainty. Containerize this way of working in a certain area. So if you have a data and AI science team, put the rules of the game very clearly on how should they work. These guys, they must work together. How can we allow this? How can we make that a frame? How can we containerize and learn here? If you try to do this across the whole company from the get-go, almost impossible. Horizon 2, now we're talking about how to federate, harvest, reuse. So the first horizon is a little bit like, I have one use case. I'm trying to fix my business controlling. I'm trying to do my reporting value chain better. That's all I'm trying to do. All of a sudden now, we have done this. We don't have one use case. We don't have one team. We have several different parts of the business that's starting to use data and AI, and we're starting to get to a next problem. How can I get what is really brilliant in this team? How can I harvest that and use that in this? How can I get the data that this team is sitting on to be data that is valuable for this team? I work on the financial services side in Scania. I have really, really good data around the customer, real customer behavior in terms of paying their bills. It's kind of interesting for the sales guys to know this, where they should sell. But we are different. We are the bank side of the business, and here is the sales guys of Scania, right? So here, it's something else. But now we come to the topic that if you want to have sharing and economies of learning in an organization, it doesn't come for free. You need to have people working with that fundamental responsibility. Even if you're within the teams, someone in the team needs to have a clear view. My role is to really facilitate sharing and learning. Do we need to have a community? Do we need to have a data governance board where we can talk about it? Do we need to create an arena for this to happen? And here now comes one of the major shifts for executives. When we now start experimenting and innovating, really the core topic becomes we can't only do the traditional planning, command and control type, plan-driven budgeting and the way. We need to work with our bets, our hypotheses, and we need these teams to work more autonomously. And autonomously still means they need to have leadership, very, very strong leadership, but we need to set the frame in a different way. The last one, this is when you're all the way, you're really operating in the digital age. Then these economies of learning starts permeating the core company culture and the core steering of the company. And then literally you're sort of, now you're competing on the same playing field as Google. Now you're acting or you're steering the company like you're a tech innovator, and you're steering your company for 10x or 100x disruption improvements. Maybe not everybody ends up here. I will stop here. This is the main topic that we've been talking about. And last words to summarize it. My belief is that even if we as executives need to lead this, the know-how to set this up is very much happening on the tactical layer. So imagine this like if you want to win Champions League in football, who is the coach of Barcelona? Then can buy and pick the right team. You have the owner of Barcelona, and his job is to coach him that can help him build the right team. That's the end game I wanted to solve with. So even if you're the executive, even if you own Barcelona, get the right super coaching on tactical layer to help you out. Okay. Thank you.